Hi there, everyone. Thanks for coming to see me. I have no idea why you're all here, but I can tell you why I'm here. First of all, it's my first time in Estonia, and I am really delighted to be here. And yeah. Tere vist! So I came to Estonia, and the first thing I wanted to do was talk about the bearish neighbor next door. And the minute I brought up that, everybody sort of cringed. And I realized that nobody wants to talk about that. So I'm glad I had like 24 hours with Anu Lil, who's the world's best journalist, financial journalist. You must all read her stuff. Yeah. Stand up, Anu. She's also a lovely person. So I'm going to do my best to share with you, based on my experiences, something that perhaps will be helpful for everyone here. I think that what I see in this conference is a lot of people who have money to invest, and congratulations, that's already a huge step in life to get to a place where you can invest. And I see a lot of people with questions as to how to do it. And so maybe I can, and if some of you have read my book, what you will learn from my book is that I'm a normal guy. I don't have any special knowledge or abilities, and I managed to succeed far less than I expected to succeed 25 years ago, but actually a little bit of success is perhaps all we need. And so I hope that coming away from this, you will have some better answers to some of your questions. Just to be clear, I'm not here to tell you anything. If there's anything I can help you to do, it's if you find out who I am and you find my answers, then you have just an example of what this guy did. And I don't ever want to say that what worked for me worked for you. I think that I've heard it already from a number of English speakers. I haven't yet understood the Estonians. We have to think for ourselves. So, and the next place I want to go is imposter syndrome. So I feel like an imposter here. I have no idea why I'm on this big stage. I don't think I deserve it. But I tell you something else. If you plan to do anything well or successful in life, you will end up feeling like you don't belong and you're actually in a place where you shouldn't be. And if you have that feeling, it may well be, it's very likely that you're actually doing something right. And I'm not a statistician, but if you go to the gym, you will see more people who have better bodies than you than people who have less good bodies than you. If you go and you apply to a great university, you will, based on the statistics, you're more likely to find people who are better students than you than people who are less good students than you. And there's a statistical explanation for it that I'm not going to give right now, because I would fail to give it. But if you feel like you're an imposter in the world of investing, then that's okay. If you feel like you don't know, then that's also okay. It means probably that you're doing something right. So that was my first point that I very, very much wanted to make to you. And when I get through these cards, it'll be time for questions. I hope to get to it says 25 here. I hope to get to sort of like 10 to 15 minutes of questions. So I just want to refocus everyone on what we are doing here. What am I doing when I approach the challenge of investing? And I want to make you aware that there are a lot of people who want to make money out of the fact that you want to invest. And a lot of the messages you hear may not be the right messages. And I want to give you one very simple idea. And to demonstrate it, I'll talk about this famous company, Berkshire Hathaway, where when Buffett and Munger started running Berkshire Hathaway, and just to check in the room how many people know which company Berkshire Hathaway is and have followed it a little bit, we have more than half. So if you don't know what the company is, turn to your neighbor and find out. But the share price of that company from the time in the late 60s when Buffett and Munger took over to today has gone from somewhere in the 60s, 70s, something like that, to $500,000. It's about, I was doing back of the envelope calculation, about 10,000x. Very, very, very large number of doubles, you can call it. So when I think of investing, I'm not thinking of beating some index. I'm not thinking of the return that I made this year. I'm asking myself the question, how do I get doubles in my life? So when I take my whole net worth or my whole portfolio, not this stock or that stock, and I double it, that's one double. And if I then take 1 turns to 2, and if I take that and I double it again, then 2 turn to 4. And I can tell you over 25 years, I took 1 and turned it into approximately 8. Over the same period, some people have done way more than that. But the key is, and that's kind of like the perspective that I think that one wants to have, not beating the S&P, not being in or out of the market, not owning this thing that's up 35%, not making that investment in venture capital. And why that? Because that's something that either I can spend myself when I need to spend it, or I can hand it over to my children or back to the investors and they can spend it. So how do we get there? So everybody or many people here may have talked about earning a return. And again, I want to shift your focus. Actually, I want to give you, earning the return is really, really important. The famous word from Warren Buffett is, before you can think about a return on capital, you need to have a return of your capital. The first thing to do is not to lose money and to find ways not to lose money. And I can tell you that that is not easy at all. I have, with devoting my full time to it, invested in one company in my portfolio that you can read about or I can tell you about that went to zero, the opposite of what I wanted to happen. And if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone in this room. But I want to give you another idea of how to get there. So how do you get to some kind of track record where if you're Warren Buffett, $1 turned into $10,000, or $1 million turned into a far larger number, or if you're in my case, $1 turned into $8, and who knows where I will get to at the end of my career, is to stay in the game. So many people think that the game is to win the returns this year or next year. And actually, if we just stay in the game of investing, and don't allow ourselves to get into situations where we get kicked out, that is the most important thing. And when I started investing, one of the most difficult moments, Annu, who's now talking to the moderator, came and visited me in Zurich. And I gave her my annualized returns, which at the time were around 8.8%. And what I wanted to tell her was, oh, I annualized at 15%. I annualized at a much higher rate. But I know so many people who started in the same way that I did 25 years ago. And now, for one reason or another, because they reached for returns, they tried to get a high number, they got kicked out of the game because they invested, say, in a leveraged company, or because they focused or concentrated too much in one particular company. They owned too few stocks. So staying in the game. And I just want to give you an idea. There's a book called Finite and Infinite Games by James Cast. Somebody write it down and send it out to everybody. Many times, people bring the wrong model. So a finite game would be like a game of chess or a game of soccer where there are rules, the players come onto the pitch, you play the game, and then you leave, somebody won, somebody lost. Investing is not like that. Investing is what the writer of the book calls an infinite game. Another infinite game, just to give you the idea, is the rivalry between superpowers. Not to mention the superpower next door, but the USSR dropped out of the rivalry because they could no longer stay in the game. You never win or lose that game of rivalry. The same with investing. It's not a game that you can really win, but if you stay in it, if you can stay in it, if you can stay in things that will compound for long enough, you will end up winning. So what do we have to do to stay in the game is a very different set of behaviors and activities. And so I will give you some of the ways in which that I have found to stay in the game. So I decided 25 years ago to go every single year to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting. Every year, I fly to Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska is not my favorite place in the world. I'd rather come to Tallinn. I'd rather come to Estonia. Far nicer people, far better coffee, far better food, far more beautiful buildings. You know, I took my parents one year to Omaha. You can't walk from one side of the street to the other. It's ridiculous. In any case, why do I go? Because there are people there who see the world in the way that I want to see the world. So to get around the right people, I want to congratulate everybody here for coming to this conference, because I want to believe, in spite of not having understood all the Estonian presentations, that you're coming here because you want to get around people who are thinking in the same way. So that action of choosing to be in the right place, in the place where people are thinking in the right way, be aware that many people don't think in the right way, and you want to not spend as much time around them. Maybe people who short stocks, maybe people who think that the way to riches, forgive me for saying it, is to put all of their money into cryptocurrencies. Get around the right people one way or another. And so this conference is another way to do it. I also want to tell you, I can dive in later into the kinds of investments that I make, but here's something to really think. I mean, we could just all go away and think about what I'm about to say now, is that when I buy shares of a company, and I urge you to think about it in the same way, I'm not just buying shares in some ticker symbol on a stock market. I'm actually going into a relationship with that company. And I have found that the companies that I own in my portfolio influence my thinking about what to do next. And when I own shares of companies where the management teams are not themselves maybe owners of the company, and they have a different philosophy to what I think the right investing philosophy should be, I make worse decisions. So not only do I go to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, I own shares of Berkshire Hathaway in my portfolio because I'm in a kind of a relationship with those people. I'll give you another company here in Europe that I will own shares in probably till I die, because I think that they're an extraordinarily thoughtful management team and well-managed business, is a company called Nestlé. Everybody's heard of Nestlé. Every single person here, I have no doubt, owns products of Nestlé in their kitchen. So here's something interesting about Nestlé. They're in some very good businesses. And the management team of Nestlé understand what a good business is. And so they tend to acquire other good businesses. So I try to study the annual reports of Nestlé more than other companies. I try to go to the meetings of these companies. I'll give you two more companies, one in the United States and one in Europe, that I think meet this criterion. So in the United States, there is a company called Markel. Markel used to be owned and run by the Markel family. It's now managed by a very famous and well-known and successful investor and capital allocator called Tom Gaynor. And they think about the world in the right way. So if I own shares of Markel, it helps me to think about the world in the right way. And I'll give you a company here in Europe which is really surprising to me, because when I first came across John Elkann, who is a descendant of the Agnelli family, and he runs this company called Exor, and he's the chairman of Ferrari, and he's the chairman of Stellantis, and I just thought, Italian robber baron, equivalent of Berlusconi. But I actually, in going to the Exor meetings, got to know somebody who cares a lot about his investors, cares a lot about allocating capital intelligently. That doesn't mean that for my portfolio, if you were to choose to do the same thing, that all your money has to be invested in Berkshire Hathaway, but it influences your thinking. And so it's good to have those people around, and it's good to be around both in one's portfolio and at a conference like this. So I want to stay a little bit more with this idea of staying in the game. And I'm going to use a word that people who help me write get upset with me when I use it. No, I'm not going to. Well, the word is called egodicity. You can go look that up. But here's the basic idea that I want to share with you. And I'm going to use a skiing analogy. And I'm really sorry because, I don't know, you just assume that countries in the north have mountains. And if I was here in the wintertime, I'd be cross-country skiing, I promise you. And I'd also be cold water swimming. because we have somebody here who's a cold water swimmer. So I'll join anybody here in 0-degree temperature, including my wonderful driver, whose name's gone out of my head. Wonderful photographer, manages photography. But here's the idea from skiing. And this goes back to how do you stay in the game? Across a ski season of maybe 10 races, it's not the fastest skier that wins. Because the fastest skier is taking risks that he might get injured. And if he's unbelievably lucky, he might make it through 10 races skiing the fastest and not get injured and therefore win. But a lot of the time, the people who are pushing it the hardest, they get injured. And the problem with injury is you get taken out of the race. And if you get taken out of the race, you can't compete, you can't win. So the guy who wins this season of ski races is the guy who skis the fastest without getting injured. It's a kind of like a more subtle and a far more difficult thing to do. And here's what's really important, if we keep the analogy with the skiing, is that in the race, what we see on television is the fastest skier. Each competitor on their own feels enormous pressure to ski the fastest. We as investors, especially I as a professional investor, feel the pressure to push the limits. But if the limits take you out of the game, and that's something that one just has to keep reminding ourselves of, and I urge you to remind yourself, if you're sitting in front of your portfolio and you don't feel very smart, and you feel like you're not making the right choices, and you feel like you're making suboptimal choices, that may be exactly the right way to win at this game or to stay in the game. And if you want to follow up with that idea more, I'm happy to. I then want to go to somewhere. So this is, I can do more on investing at the end. I want to stay with time for questions, but I think that we're at 12 minutes, so I have to sort of like hurry up. But you know, as you sort of like survey the environment, I want to warn you that there are many people who are not giving you the whole truth. If somebody shares with you the results in a portfolio, the answer is, show me everything. Don't show me one portfolio. You put 10 different portfolios, you delete the 9 that didn't perform very well, and you show me the one that did. So there are many ways in which people are incentivized to not share the whole truth, to share everything. And if we're going to succeed in this game, we have to start getting a far better sense of who is really kind of telling the truth. And I can tell you that for those of you who've either read or not read my book, a big motivation for me for writing that book was as I started to get success, people wanted to attribute that success to things that I didn't think were so important. And I really wanted to tell people the reality of what had happened and what was going on and what contributed to success, not the BS. When I took my father to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting, the one time he sat watching Warren Buffett for 10, 15 minutes, and then he turned to me and he whispered and he said, I get it now. And he said, I can see that the guy is just being honest. He's saying what he sees. He's not pretending. He's not trying to slant it in one way or another. He's just responding with the honest truth. And I want to tell you that saying the honest truth is hard. For oneself, to tell the truth is hard. And I have, the first chapter of my book, when I wrote it, I wasn't sure that I would actually send it off to the publisher, because I wasn't sure that anybody would like to invest with me after they read about the place that I had worked at and the very bad decisions that I had taken. So my experience going from that to telling my wife that I'll be late home because I left the office late, and what I used to do is she would call me up and say, where are you? And I'd still be leaving the office, and I'd want to say, well, I'm actually on the tram, I'd want to say that I'm closer. It's a small lie. But I have learned that even in those small things, there's a certain amount of difficulty and unpleasantness in telling the truth. But when we get there, things become clearer and we can make better decisions. So in terms of telling the truth to oneself, I'll give you one example that is more from the investing world. So I really did. So in my book, there's a chapter about bidding on and winning this charity lunch with Warren Buffett. And all the way up to that lunch, there was a part of me that wanted to believe that I was as smart as Warren Buffett. I really did want to believe that. And I think that my experience at that lunch was that his brain works on a higher clock speed than mine, and I hate that. I wish that my brain, and I just don't agree with him when he says that, you know, you need a 120 IQ and all the extra IQ points are not necessary. And I haven't had the chance to say this to him, but what I'd like to say is, well, give me the IQ points then. I'll take them all off you. But I think that acknowledging that truth to oneself, in my case, acknowledging that painful truth to myself, freed me up. It freed me up to make better decisions about my own life because I stopped trying to be or competing with Warren Buffett. And so John Elkann has this sort of word, seek out the truth tellers. Find people who are willing to commit themselves to the reality. That's something that I do in the companies that I invest in. I'm looking for people who are willing to give the bad news up front, who are happy to not hide the bad news, and maybe if there's good news, they're happy to bring it out later. But it seems to me that there are many incentives in the world not to tell the full truth, because people can make money out of it, they can do all sorts of things, but we do better. We stay in the game, we end up with better results when we seek out the truth in others, seek out people who are truth tellers, and seek the truth in ourselves. So 7 minutes to go. Okay, next thing. So there is no investor who hasn't felt like an idiot. None. If anybody has been on this stage who thinks that it's easy, it's not. It's hard. Every single person who approaches managing their own portfolio, sending money to somebody else, will experience moments of feeling like you're a complete idiot. How on earth could I do that? And what I want to tell you is, forgive yourself, be forgiving, be kind to yourself, be aware that you are putting yourself, you may have money, you may have many good things in your life, but in the task of trying to invest well, you're putting yourself in a position of adversity. And we have to be kind to ourselves because adversity is hard. The most important reason why we want to be kind to ourselves is that if we're not, we will kick ourselves out of the game. We'll stop doing it. So in a certain way, it's long-term greedy to be forgiving of our own mistakes. Every single one of us will see a company that is going to take over the planet, and we will buy it at a super high valuation, thinking it does take over the planet, and then it's going to end up that the reality was something completely different. And we're going to say, how on earth could I have ever thought that that would be the case? That's happened to me. I should have a story for you, but I don't right now. And so to be forgiving is a way of staying in the game. Another way of being forgiving to oneself is all the things that we've missed. So I'll tell you something that I feel like I've missed right now. It's been right in front of me. So the largest market cap, I believe, in Europe is a company called LVMH. I'm sure we all know LVMH. And I feel like I've been going up a learning curve of the incredible business model that LVMH has and the brilliance of the people who run it. But my understanding of the company has gone behind the valuation. So as I understand more and more what a good business it is, the valuation keeps on getting higher and higher, and I don't own it. And again, I should forgive myself for that. That's okay. If I had been ahead of the curve 20 years ago, if I'd studied the company in the right way, maybe I would have been able to own it and I would have been able to participate. Another company that I missed out on, and I can go into the story, is Apple. Again, forgive yourself. That's okay. Tell yourself, I try to tell myself, that is part of what the life of investing is. You will feel this way. So going more to human emotions. So, I don't believe. So I have a lot of differences with Mr. Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger. So they say they're rational. And you have a lot of investment writings that say that the best investors don't feel emotion. I don't know, maybe that's true. That's not the case for me. I feel emotion, and I think that what we want to do is kind of like make friends with those emotions, shake their hands, invite them in, and find out what they're teaching us. And I have felt enormous amounts of envy for other investors who have better returns than I do and who are managing more money. And I think that envy, I believe that is it is a guide to something. And we have to kind of listen to what it's saying, and it will actually teach us something. And very briefly, when I lived in New York, I think I had quite a bit of envy for Bill Ackman, amongst others, who was also living in New York, managing more money with higher returns, all sorts of things. But as I kind of made friends with that emotion and tried to understand what it was trying to teach me, one of the things that it taught me is that I have to leave New York. I don't have to live in New York. So when we feel those emotions, if we can take a deep breath and try and understand what they're teaching us to do, so make friends with them, listen to them, don't act in a knee-jerk reaction on them. I've experienced, myself and other friends of mine, the experience of owning a company, something happens, the share price goes down, and one wants to sell in disgust. So we don't want to do that. We want to feel the disgust, feel that anger, but then learn from it. Because most of the time, acting in the market is a bad idea. And just to give you an idea, today, we're halfway through the year, and I don't think I've conducted one trade this year. So I've just sat on my portfolio, and I've done nothing. In part because I feel like I'm in the right companies, but in part because I know that if I trade, that is going to result in frictional costs and will result in me having lower returns over the long run. And that most of the time, when I feel those emotions, I have a company in India which I bought. It went up about 5 times, and now it's down about 60%. And I'm asking myself, why on earth didn't you sell half at the top? And I wrote about it in my letter. I have reasons for not doing that, but that feeling of regret, that feeling of you idiot, is not something to knee-jerk reaction into acting in the portfolio. For me, it's something to kind of try and understand, did I make a mistake there? Is it as good as business as I thought it was? I actually, last week, where are we now? We're Saturday. So I flew to India on Monday to meet with the company Tuesday and met with another company Wednesday and flew back Thursday. So that was a good thing to do, to try and understand more about whether my thesis was correct or not. So managing one's emotions. Every single person who succeeds in the challenge of investing is going to have self-doubt. You're going to have a lot of it. Get used to it. So 1 minute to go and no questions? That's terrible. I got so much I want to talk to you about. I'll just stop with one thing. How do I construct my portfolio? I've talked about some of the things that are in the portfolio. Companies that I've gotten married to and more or less throw away the keys. I'm married to Berkshire Hathaway. I'm not married to Markel, actually. I'm kind of married to Exor. And then I have starter positions in companies, for example, an Indian energy exchange, which is the company that I talked to you about. And I'm really not sure what will happen there. But I kind of keep my mental stability in the Nestle's and the Berkshire Hathaways of the world. And then I go out and I sort of like try and find better businesses, but where there's all sorts of risks associated. I am now going to stop and see if there is any time for questions. Thank you so much for coming to listen to me. I hope it's been helpful. I am really sorry if I have not made myself clear. And I will turn to the moderator to see what happens now.
So thank you so much, Guy. Actually, don't worry about the screen. Actually, we have about 15 minutes to go, so we have time for all questions. And if you have something else you would like to tell, you can tell right now, or we start with questions.
I will bore the crowd. Okay, I want to hear from everyone.
Let's start. First one.
Hey. Thanks for the performance. I really liked it. What are your plans for Estonia? And if you haven't tried it yet, then please try kama.
Aita. What is kama?
It's a dessert.
I have not tried it. I will try it. You know, first of all, I really, this is a very special place. I don't understand how a country can re-emerge from, I know it's already 30 years ago, but to emerge from under the hands of a very unfree and nasty place. And somehow the people that I see and meet are kind and soft and not full of that kind of thuggishness that one sees emanating from our bearish neighbor. I do see it in the buildings. There are some buildings that were constructed clearly during the Soviet era. They're not very beautiful, but there are plenty of beautiful buildings here. I think that what excites me about how Estonia looks out to the world, and it's a city-state effectively. It's a tiny place, but the world is its oyster. The European Union is certainly its oyster. And I'm curious to see what comes up. I think that it's going to be a fascinating place. But I don't have any specific plans in terms of investing or anything else. But you guys got me here, so who knows what's next?
Okay, so thank you very much for really warm words. And the next one, please.
Hello, thank you very much. I understand that you are someone who values and understands the power of environment and putting yourself in the correct environment which suits your way of thinking, which is, I think, why you made the move from New York to Zurich. Can you briefly describe what kind of effect that had on your ability of doing doubles?
Yeah,
Thank
and delighted to do that. I would tell you that, so just talking about the last question, so first of all, I learned that when I named the country whose letter begins with R, nobody responded to me, but I feel a lot of similarities between Estonia and Israel, and I spent 4 years of my life growing up in Israel. I have an Israeli passport, I have half part of my family there, but it is a country that is sort of cut off from its natural hinterland. Not much trade happening, more now, but for much of its life, not much trade happening with the Arabic world or with the Middle East. But Israel's sort of like LA West, Los Angeles West, and it's a kind of like, maybe this is maybe not Los Angeles East, but something like that, I don't know. But in terms of environment, the reason why I went back to the previous questioner is I think that Estonia is actually a spectacular place from which to be a global investor. Now, I'm not investing from here, but one of the ideas I looked at recently is a company that owns, well, it's called, it's gold mining, but instead of being an industrial thing, it's individuals, poor families, farmer-type families who mine gold by going into lakes and rivers in a place where gold is there's a rich deposits of gold, and they sell it. It's based in Peru, and the company is headquartered in Canada. And the guy that talked to me about it is based in Switzerland. I think that when you live in a small country like Estonia, you have actually a better perspective on the rest of the world because you can kind of see and feel the rest of the world. The rest of the world comes into you more. If I know that when I go to Paris, the rest of the world disappears. Because there's just like so much that is there in Paris that takes your attention. And I love that feeling here that people love living here, but are aware of and engaged with the whole planet. And Switzerland allows me to do that. I feel like Switzerland kind of disappears on me. Actually, now I've been living in Switzerland 14 years. I now have Swiss citizenship. I'm now much more involved in local Swiss things. So I vote in the referenda. I know what's going on politically. And so I may be more distracted by what's going on locally. But I think that since I wrote the book, and the book is almost 8 years old now, I think that one thing that I kind of like really focus in the book on one's physical environment. I talk about the setup of the office. I talk about where the Bloomberg monitor is. I talk about having a room with no electronics. And what I get to now is, look, there are very successful investors, long-term value investors who live in New York City. And so why are they successful if I'm right, if I was right in the book? And I think that I come back to, it's the people that we're in a relationship with that is the most important aspect of the environment. Who are our friends? Whose companies' shares do we own? Which investment partnerships are we in? Even who is our stockbroker? I think it's very, very hard. Was it Robin Hood it was called? The American, sort of gambling quasi. If you have an account there, you're less likely to be a long-term investor than if you have an account at the American company Charles Schwab. So what I come down to is really, really pick who you spend time with. And that is the most important aspect of the environment. Thank you for the question.
So let's take the next one.
Our influencer has a question as well. Thank you. That's so kind. You're really popular. They love you here.
Thank you. I would like to follow up on your concept of finding the truth tellers. As a professional investor, you have the chance to take a flight to India and look into how a business works and meet the management. For a regular retail investor, I feel as time has gone on, the amount of complexity and information that builds in the financial sector, it just gets worse and worse and worse. So do you have some ideas or recommendations for a regular retail investor on how to actually go through the data, the information, how to prioritize so that you can be confident that your analysis is actually good, because there's just so much information out there?
And it's a spectacular question. And of course, all the most difficult questions don't have any easy, or good questions don't have any easy answers. So here's where I start. There are a whole bunch of companies that I will have no chance to really understand, and they will blindside me. So biotech, new developments, companies that are working on new drugs, that have a drugs pipeline, where I need to understand whether the drug will work or not, is out. End of story, finished. Not going to do it. I spent quite a lot of time looking at the semiconductor industry. I read this book, Chips, and it's fascinating what's going on in the kind of the power plays between United States and China on where semiconductors are produced. And I really got the sense that there was no way that I will really fully understand the dynamics of what's going on there. So again, that's out. By contrast, and I think that the way I kind of build my portfolio, if anybody, I urge everybody here to read as many Berkshire Hathaway annual reports as you can, because it will set for you, at least sets for me, a gold standard of how somebody can report. And I think that what I get from those is that, I mean, Warren Buffett says it, and by the way, there's Arco here, who's in the audience, and it's a familiar face, and so thank you, Arco, for being here, is that he really does, he knows all of this, by the way. He understands everything I'm saying. There's nothing new for Arco in any case. But he communicates with his investors. He says, I want you to be able to know what's going on as if you only read my annual letter and as if you are my aunt or somebody like that. And you really see him going out of his way to explain the things that are important. By contrast, I can tell you that in my small, as a guy who runs, I mean, I run a fund, and there's some accounting for the fund, and there's some accounting for the small business that manages the fund. And there are so many ways in which I could either choose to make sure that the auditors and people reading the report see, and ways in which I can hide. At the end of the day, I think that in the companies that I do look at, so if you take Nestle, for example, there's plenty of resources right now where you could probably ask ChatGPT, has Nestle taken any actions in their accounting that makes their earnings look better through, for example, taking depreciation schedules and extending them out? So you can get clues, and if you see one of them, there are probably more of them that are taking place. So I think that two sides to my answer, to try and actually bring this to a close and stop flying around, is you got to pick where, and there are whole industries, for example, semiconductors, biotech, that I'm not going to succeed in. And then you will see tells. Another great thing to do as an exercise is to, I hope everybody here has heard of Enron, to look at the Enron reports. This was a company that spectacularly went bankrupt. And see what you could have seen in their report just before they went bankrupt. And there were a lot of things. One very obvious thing, for example, was that they had a qualified accounting opinion. So you read that letter from the accountant and see whether it is qualified or unqualified. And if the accountant finds a way to qualify the letter saying this is an accurate representation of where the company is, you know that there are many other things that may not be good. But at the end of the day, you have to work at being a good analyst, I guess.
So
thank you for the question.
Who else has questions? Someone was there. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Oh.
You spoke about being truthful and honesty in investments and making this marriage-like relationships with companies. My question is, when you, in your experience, have you encountered partners or companies that have been dishonest or have maybe abused or your openness or truthfulness, and how have you had to, and how have you coped with that?
So it's a great question that brings me to, so in the case of companies, I mean, I'm a portfolio investor. I don't have that close a relationship with the companies, and in any case, there's not anything that I can do to them or force them to do something. But I've experienced time and again, if I think I'm going to be smarter than a management that plays fast and loose, there's no point. I will lose. The best thing to do is to take my losses and to walk out of the room as soon as I can. I mean, I think that there's a book or there's somebody who said that the most important thing in poker is to choose which table you're playing at. It's not so much to be good at the game, but to play against a bunch of people who will allow you to win. In a certain way, when it comes to companies, some people are playing the game of let's get rich together with our investors and let's treat them fairly, and you want to be with them. And some people are not. Some people are playing a different game, and they're trying to find a way to use the rules to get rich at the expense of the investors, and you want to stay far away from them as possible. And I think that new fools are born every minute, but these people are serially doing it, and so once you've seen them do it once, the answer is stay away. And usually I think that on the internet you can research these people and find the ones who actually want to treat their investors as partners. In a more general way, you're absolutely right that if you show up in the world in a kind of naive, honest way, you're going to get quite a few bad people coming at you who want to take advantage of that. And I think that my experience is that you want to sort. So, they can do it to you once, and then you kind of you don't put them into prison. You don't say you'll never meet them again, but you just keep them at a distance, basically. So the goal there is to keep sorting through until the people close to you are great people. Yeah.
Okay.
He was trying to ask a question, so maybe the last question.
Let's take two more. Is it okay? Yes, one.
Hello, thanks. You're having a much larger scenery around you, so my question is a bit complex, but how have the professional investing scene changed after the enormous money print? Have the tactics of the investing changed? Because there's so much money hunting for returns and investments.
Here's my experience of the last few years. And it was my experience at, so Arco, I met him because he comes to the conference I have in Switzerland. So, I'm going to kind of partly talk to Arco about this. I wrote about this in my letter. There were presentations on companies like Roku and companies like Caravana. So I guess nobody knows these companies here, but these were companies with really sexy stories. And somehow, even not the management team, but the person presenting those companies at that conference, they made me feel like an idiot, because it's like, you know, why on earth are you not buying the shares of this thing? People are getting rich and you're not. And the era of money printing, it seems to me, created a business incentive for people to tout and promote high-flying companies. And the thing is that not only did they appear smart for as long as the share prices were going up and levitating to crazy valuations, they were also able to raise money off investors because they looked smart to other investors and they said, well, look at my great returns. And in my case, I did very, very little in that time, and I just found myself feeling more and more and more stupid. That bubble very, very clearly broke in the last 2 years, and I don't know what's next. I have no idea what's next. But that is something that I clearly understood and saw, and luckily enough, did not participate in. And I think that when I wrote about this in my annual letter, what helped me not participate, and it's so strange because this is a conference where I invite people who I think are smart to come and present ideas so that I can learn from them. And in my conference, that is supposed to be full of smart value investors, we had the same madness. So I wasn't able to insulate myself in a certain way in my small group of people from that madness. And I think that one of the most important things that helped me, really, and I know that it's going to sound like I'm just hammering on something, was to go to the Berkshire Hathaway meeting every year. Somehow that kept me sane throughout the year. The one thing I did do in that period was buy shares of Twitter. And I regret doing it. I didn't understand what I was doing, but it was a small amount. So that's what happened in the last 2 years. You know, in 5 years' time, we'll understand what this period was about. But we don't understand it when we're in it. And my view is, in that regard, is, and this is, I'm sure you've heard this, I stay pretty much fully invested, and I try and own businesses that treat my capital well, that take care of my money because they're in the game of making money with their investors, and they've found ways to make money through owning decent businesses. Like, Nestle is a great kind of teaching case. And the kinds of businesses that they've sold out of and the kinds of businesses that they've bought into can really teach one a lot. And I spend a lot of the time doing nothing. I mean, and what I've done, for what it's worth, is how the hell do I justify doing nothing? I have outside investors. So in my case, I think it may be that the best thing that I should have done is not take outside investors, because it creates a pressure for me to appear smart and for me to justify the fact that they've come and invested with me. And that is an incongruency. That is a possibility for me to kind of withhold the truth in one way or another a little bit. A way I've gotten around that, well, not around it, the way I've tried to deal with it is I don't charge the investors a management fee. So if I haven't done anything, or if the fund is down, I say, well, look, I haven't charged you anything. So it helps, but it doesn't help entirely. And my answer is just to stick around. Even though, last year I didn't have a great result. This year I'm not particularly happy. I have these shares in India that haven't done particularly well. But I don't know. I hope that's helpful.
Okay. So I promised one more, so there is someone. I hope it's
simple and short question to the end. You mentioned different things, for example, overpriced companies. And if you look at the stock market now, we see clearly overpriced companies. But I see the reasoning there, or at least arguments, that some of them are new technologies, there are new ways to do the business, and among them is in Europe it's very important ESG, the new principle of doing the socially responsible business. Do you see, from your experience, as rather a hype and a limitation of the return, because we are limiting out all other the boring companies, or this is clearly a change of the principles in the market, and who are not aligning that will die out and bear the dinosaurs of our time? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question. So ESG and high-flying companies, I just want to tell you, I like your glasses. I've been thinking of getting similar kinds of glasses. Maybe we can talk about that. But so here's what, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a teacher, but if this lands well with you, try it out. Next time you feel the urge to buy into a fund that is an ESG fund, maybe, or to buy shares of some high-flying company, maybe you wake up one day and you want to buy shares of NVIDIA because AI is going to take over the world. Go for a walk. And I do this. So shut all of that out. Put myself into a place where there's nothing to read, nothing to look at, no iPhone, no nothing. And say, in a certain way, have a conversation with my children's children and say, is this something that I believe, if I invest these hard-earned dollars, euros, is it going to earn a return for me? So ESG, I can't eat ESG, and my investors don't want to be told, hey, I lost you money or I owed you a mediocre return, but hey, our companies all score really high on ESG. So I apologize to the ESG people in the room. We certainly need to turn the planet around. It's our only planet. There's no chance that I'm ever going to live on Mars. We're putting too much carbon into the atmosphere. It's systemic. We don't know what's going to happen. That's really, really important. And it's not a problem that our governments know how to solve. But it's not my job as an investor of my own money, my children's future, the future of other investors' children, their hard-earned money. My job is to earn a return for them. And I find it hard enough to do without starting to look at all these ESG criteria. What I do is I say, is this company helping or hurting the environment? Because if it's hurting the environment, they may get given costs. But I think it's really important. I don't think that anybody here should invest their money and go home and feel good about the fact that they've invested in an ESG fund that scores high, but not taking care of their retirement. The retirement is the most important thing. And I think that there's an awful lot of woolly thinking, not good thinking about ESG. First of all, and I can't take too long, I'm turning this into a talk and we might have somebody else who needs to go. ESG, environmental, social, governance. Those are three such different things, and you have a company that has a score on all those three things. So social and governance, I mean, I have a different way of looking at governance, and I certainly don't agree with the people who score on ESG. And on environment, I would just tell you, and this is a subject for a whole 2-hour discussion, the focus of ESG funds and ESG-directed funds pulling out of anything that's carbon-related has actually created the crisis that we had over the last 2 years in energy costs. Not enough money is going into oil for sure. And even if the whole world, all transportation is run on electricity, we will still need oil. And actually we'll still need coal because we cannot make steel in any reasonable way without using metallurgical coal. The book that I urge you to read is by a guy called Václav Smil, How the World Works. We do not help the world by just when I buy, so long story. Second one, high-flying companies, I mean, the market screams at you. It doesn't actually scream at you, but I want to kind of give you that idea. The market says, hey, I'm NVIDIA. Why the hell haven't you bought me? Didn't you know I'm going to take over all of artificial intelligence? We're the only chips that are important for artificial intelligence. And you got to get away from that noise and ask yourself if you want to own a company that I think has more than $1 trillion market cap and has revenues of about 50 billion. And ask yourself whether that is a good price to sales ratio or any ratio you like. And how you want to sit down, and you do that in a quiet room away from all the noise. And no, I don't think that that's going to help compound money. Sit there with that number, and this is perhaps a good way to end. What is my goal? My goal is to earn doubles, not to call somebody up and say I own NVIDIA, or not to call somebody up and say, look how well my fund scores on these ESG criteria that some guy sitting behind a desk who has the same intelligence that I do threw together. The key is to earn those doubles, and you can eat doubles. I can't eat ESG, and I can't eat calling somebody up and saying NVIDIA is a great company. I'd love to talk to you some more, but I think that we have a timing issue. So.
Thank you so much.